Okay, so I think the difference between structure and formation is that a structure implies something that has been constructed. That is, it implies that somebody has designed and built it, whereas a formation is more neutral, something that could have been created by millions upon millions of small organisms. So I think that's why formation is slightly better there. Um, but
But
I would
what does it
say
mean formation here? I mean, coral
it,
formations.
a coral formation, it's just something that has been
Formed.
formed,
Yeah.
yeah, through the process of coral growing on it, whereas a structure,
But it
it
seems that
kind
it is
of
2000 kilometer. That's
mm,
very long. I haven't
so
seen such a thing.
you would have to say you could say that a like the Great Wall of China is a structure because it's been built,
Mm,
but the Great Barrier Reef is a formation because it has not been deliberately built.
cool.
It's
By
kind of grown over
nature.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. And why this one is frigid?
Okay, so frigid is cold.
Yeah.
So a frigid environment means a freezing or frozen environment, like it's that cold that it brings on.
Why we have to
Um,
use this in this context? I mean, what does it mean? Can you
so
explain?
this is about the very cold ocean floor. So it's deep under the ocean. So the relatively shallow penetration of solar energy and the sinking of cold subpolar water combine to
Mm.
make most of the deep ocean floor a frigid environment.
And
So in
yeah.
that sentence, it has to be frigid
Do you know
rather
why
than
I
warm.
said that it is not frigid? Because when we see uh, in natural life, I mean, when we see some movies from the floor of the ocean floor, it is not like an icy stuff. It is not
Mm,
frigid.
yeah, so I guess it's the experience of being cold. Like if we were going to get a precise definition, we would say that's extremely cold rather
Yeah,
than
great,
freezing
perfect.
cold.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like we would die from hypothermia quite quickly in that environment, which
yeah,
you probably couldn't.
yeah.
You would still die. In fact, being in the ocean at all for any length of time can lead to hypothermia, even if it's relatively warm.
I didn't know that. So okay,
Mm.
I will change my future job. I wanted to be a welder underneath of the water in the oceans, but they pay a lot of money. But yeah, I will not do that again.
I
Okay.
imagine that you would wear a suit, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe.
If you're wearing a suit, I think it would protect you a bit longer. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what about this one? More exciting because it was totally unexpected.
Mm.
Unexpected.
Yeah. So in this case, unexpected fits better because we have an expectation that there's not going to be much life under there based on what they've said already about being deep under the ocean. Um, Undermined doesn't fit because undermining is a process of digging under something until it collapses. It can be a way of defeating someone. So you could undermine someone's defenses, that is, dig underneath the wall and it would collapse. Um, but it undermining, and when they use it metaphorically, it would mean like um, doing or saying things that diminish someone's confidence or
Yeah.
diminish their
Can,
security in a
yeah.
job.
Can you tell
Mm.
me something and undermine my confidence? I want to learn this one. I know that you explained this word, I mean, previous time to us, but
Um,
tell me something.
if I said my colleague questions everything I say and it's starting to undermine my confidence, um, or my boss keeps um, changing the words in my drafts. My
Oh,
supervisor keeps rewriting my drafts and it's undermining my confidence.
oh, it's undermining my confidence. But I
Yeah.
mean, this is just a comment and revision. You should tolerate that. I mean, yeah, I understand sometimes it is really frustrating if it gives you every day, for example, to change this. but okay, it will undermine my
Mm.
confidence. So, okay.
So you could, so if the suggestions became more aggressive, you might say, I feel a bit undermined. I need you to be more supportive. And then maybe they would adjust the tone of their suggestions.
The tone is always polite, actually, but yeah, I like that. That's a good example. So you said that unexpected.
Mm,
So when it is unexpected, it means that we don't expect something. Expect
yeah.
a lot of discovery of a lot of life
So
underneath.
basically, the paragraph is about expecting there to be life near the surface of the ocean and not expecting there to be life deep under the ocean. So when they discover life deep under the ocean, that's unexpected.
Yeah,
It's
and
exciting.
yeah.
It is found down there. So they're saying that there are hot springs and that they predicted they would find that kind of thing um there were these geological features.
Mm.
So I think this is where the plates are moving apart. Magma is coming up from under the surface and making contact with the ocean water, and it's creating hot water.
Oh,
I
so
don't know if it's still magma after it's come into contact with the water, or if it becomes lava or rock or
forming
something.
rock. Yeah, yeah. And
It's a type of worm, so it's an animal, I think.
okay, so it is dangerous. Okay, I got it. Maybe we can
I
say.
don't know if they'd be dangerous. I guess we don't really come into contact with them.
Mm.
But I think that they're just worms that are sort of they're attached to the ground, like they're kind of dug into the ground and then they eat things that fall down.
Oh, it's things that is filled. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. And can you explain?
It's completely different.
Okay,
Yeah.
muesli. Yeah, that's great. It is just nuts and something vegan and stuff.
It's usually cereal, fruit, and nuts. Yeah.
Cereal, fruit, and nut muesli. Great.
Yeah.
Cool. And
Often sweet.
often sweet.
Um, so like you might have muesli with honey or um something like that.
Great. Muesli. Okay. And you spell this one what? Can you spell this one? Pronounce this one? Sorry, pronounce this one.
Muscle.
Muscle, like
So it's
muscle.
pronounced exactly the same as muscle, as in the part of the body,
Yeah, great. Now we got it.
but
Thanks.
it's spelled differently.
Yeah, cool. And you said that thrived around the hot spring. When you say that
Mm,
thrived, it means that it,
yeah. It usually means like not just surviving, but like living happily or growing or you know reproducing successfully, all of those things. So thriving is a bit more than surviving. So I guess if they'd found one or two creatures alive there, it might not have been quite as surprising as finding them growing. The definition here is growing vigorously.
vigorously means very, what do you call it?
Strong, and that it's not like there's just one or two of them that have ended up down there. There's actually a whole lot of them growing successfully and
Successfully. Okay. So even
mm,
if I succeed in finding someone and then I don't know, I live happily, it is called vigorously I am living. Is it that? I don't
I
understand.
think I think
Thrive, I mean the meaning of thrive.
I think you could have vigor. That is, you could be strong.
Hmm.
Um, and you could, if you thrive, then you're kind of living, but you're not just surviving. You're sort of strong and successful.
Successful. Okay, the difference
Mm,
between survival and thrive.
yeah.
Great. And let me ask you about this one. It was the previous one. So ocean floor. I have to write this one down. Ocean floor. So now let's go to this ones. So we have here enough exercise. Can you?
So I think electronic usually refers to something a bit more complex. So the electric it means that it's powered by electricity. whereas the electronic is more like it has computer chips and things in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Can you give us an example for electric? I found just electric vehicles.
Yeah, so they talk about electric vehicles because what's interesting about them is what powers them, not the fact that they have computers or electronics in them.
Hmm,
So that's why they often use electric vehicles because it's to distinguish them from fossil fuel powered vehicles.
exactly. So,
Um,
yeah,
mm,
electric, for example, can we say electric recorder? Or is it, I mean, I'm just searching for some more examples to remember this.
I think this definition is not very strong. I don't think the distinction has like a strong um, reason for making the distinction, but I think in usage it tends to be used in some ways and not others. So you would talk about like an electronic keyboard,
Electronic keyboard. Oh, that's very hard.
like an electronic
Electric
synthesizer.
guitar. Electric
But
guitar.
yeah, then you talk about an electric guitar. And
Guitar, yeah.
so in that case, like the guitar has some machinery in it that like picks up signals and transmits them, but it doesn't have like microchips in it,
Cool. Yeah. And
usually.
exactly. So this is enough exercise. I will just write it down. No, I will do it later. So, and in terms of these ones, can you tell us with a heavy emphasis on disaster relief after the Asian tsunami? So,
So to give something emphasis is to focus on it or draw attention to it. So I think what they're saying is that they're talking about charitable giving. They're saying that people gave money to a wide range of different charities, but they emphasized, that is, they prioritized or focused on disaster relief. So what they're saying is that there was a broad range of different things that people would give money to, but that more of them paid attention to just a narrower range of things, which is to do with climate disasters.
I got it. Perfect.
So a heavy emphasis on means that their more attention was given to
So
charity for disasters than to other charities.
can
I think it would be you would use it more to say something like, when I'm applying for this job, I really want to put emphasis on these three publications because they're the most relevant to the work that I'd be doing in that job. So
can
I'm
you
going to
use a heavy
highlight
emphasis?
those.
No, no, I want you to use heavy emphasis. Okay.
Um, so you could say in the Vice Chancellor's recent communication, he placed a heavy emphasis on the need to cut costs at the university. So
Ah,
what you're implying is that he talked about lots of things,
mm,
but that he really focused our attention on that one
heavy
thing.
emphasis on. Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. And why he used uh,
So they're talking about what they gave away in 2005 and comparing it to the average of a 40-year period.
oh, about the
So they
40.
gave slightly more in 2005 than that average of each year for the last 40 years. So when they talk about a 40-year average, they're talking about the average rate of giving, the average percentage,
Mm,
um,
great.
for
Cool.
across all of
And we
those
got it.
years.
Perfect. And what
Yeah.
about these ones? And here, no, sorry, not this one. Why? Go to this one. No. Yeah, this one. So here we have a stretch of DNA. It is correct.
Mm,
Why we cannot say a line of DNA?
mm. A short stretch is like you're kind of imagining it like
Like
it's
a
more like a
rope or a
segment.
string, maybe a string.
It's like a segment because you would talk about a stretch of road, like being the road between two points, rather than a line, because that implies that it really only has length. It doesn't have any width. So I think they're asking us to imagine
Exactly because of this I
DNA is more like a ribbon. It has width and length.
oh
I think that's the idea. Like if you look at how it's usually represented as kind of ribbons
ribbons, yeah.
made up of smaller pairings. So I think that that's why stretch rather than line might be preferred here.
So as you said, a
Um,
line doesn't have any widths, and
I
that
also think in the context of DNA and genetics, when you talk about lines, you'd be talking about lines of inheritance. You'd be talking about, you'd actually be talking about through time, like evolution. Um, so that's probably why in this context, line would also be avoided. Um, talking about people's genetics or
yeah,
genes, and I know they're not talking about it directly here. They're talking about DNA, which is, a component of that more general way of understanding life. But when you're talking about anything to do with inherited biological information, and they talk about lines, they're often talking about lines of inheritance. That they're talking about like we bred a new line of laboratory mice, or we can follow the evolutionary line of this particular gene to see how it's developed in this fruit fly population.
yeah,
So I think that the word line in the context of anything to do with DNA or genetics might also be just a bit confusing.
perfect. I got it.
Mm,
Now I got it completely. And what about this one? Realm of public health. But I've heard word of public health a lot, so it was wrong, yeah?
yeah. I think if Realm weren't available, World would probably be okay. But Realm implies something smaller than the world. Like if you were saying that public health is its own world, you'd be saying it was kind of separate from and different to the rest of the world.
So, but
Whereas
Adam,
if
is word of public health, have you heard about word of public health in general as a native person?
I have heard, I'm sure I've heard that phrase
Okay,
in the
good.
world of public health. I guess you'd be using that to emphasize public health's um, as its own self-contained arena, like its
Mm.
own self-contained reality. Because the word world seems to be either about something very big or about a separate reality. Like if you're talking about like virtual worlds.
Yeah, it's a very big, it's not a
Mm.
big, it's a realm.
Whereas
Yeah.
a realm is like a terrain within a larger reality.
Larger or a smaller reality?
So realm, if we're using realm, it's a smaller segment of a larger reality.
Oh, a
So there are
smaller segment
numerous
of,
realms, and
yeah.
one of them is public health. So again, it's just slightly better to say the realm of public health
Yeah.
than the world of public health, because the world of public health implies that people who do public health are actually in a separate world. They're in their own world, not in our
Yeah.
world.
So, yeah, we got it perfectly.
Mm.
So they are not in a different world, they're in the same world, so a realm. Okay.
So you could talk about the world of pure mathematics, and you'd be sort of suggesting that mathematicians live on another planet.
Mm.
Um,
But they are, but if we say realm of mathematics, what does that
it
indicate?
it implies that they're separate, but they're still connected. Like they've got their own ways of thinking, but they're still connected to the rest of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Cool. And also these ones, I talked about these ones, I am going backwards. Yeah. Oh, this is a crazy one. To maximize public transport patronage, can you pronounce
Hmm.
this one? Sorry for us.
Patronage.
And what does that mean here?
It
Public
it
transport
means
patronage
it means usage.
usage.
So if
Ooh.
you're a patron, it means you're like a customer.
But patron
Um,
means someone who paid money for example, YouTube's. Is it that one?
so a patron supports or is a customer of something. So if you're a patron of the arts, if you're a patron of the arts, you pay artists to complete their works.
I don't have money to do that, but anyway, I
Yeah,
patronize.
but it's also used just to mean a customer. So
Customer.
you could talk about the customers of a business, but you could also talk about its patrons. That is the people who support it through going and spending money there. In this case, it's patronage means they use and pay for public transport.
Yeah, perfect. So why we cannot use ing form?
Mm.
Can you tell us? And
It's
I remember
more,
you told us when we use encourage, we have to use two plus two to infinity, you know? If there was one example, but now we have ing form
mm,
here.
yeah, so to encourage walking, um, is not the same as encouraging someone to
To walk.
walk.
What's the
Yeah.
difference?
If I say I encourage you to walk to work once per week, then I'm, in that case, to walk is a verb, but to encourage walking, in this case, the ing form has moved out of the world of verbs and it's now become a phenomenon. It's become a noun that we're pointing to and saying walking is something that people do. Um,
So,
so it's a way of, this is actually using the ing form. In this case, it's flexible. You could use it as a verb. You could say, I am walking. So it's part of a verb phrase, a verb group. Or you could say, walking is a healthy pastime. So then it's a noun. In this situation, it's become a noun.
and Adam, another example, can you tell us about this part? When we say, for example, comparable, what does that mean here?
Um, so there's no data available for comparable areas. That means there's no there's no information about similar enough areas to make a proper comparison. So if they're comparable or comparable, it means that that you can actually look at them alongside each other and successfully make the comparison to make a decision about one thing or another. Um, it's like the idea is the same one as comparing apples with oranges. You could say that apples and oranges are not comparable. They're not comparable. They're totally different kinds of fruit. So if I said this um, when I bite into this fruit, it is juicy and sweet, but when I bite into this one, it's got a really bitter taste. And I was holding an apple and an orange. Someone could say they're not comparable. You have to peel your orange before you can bite into it. Does that make sense? And reasonably compare them. Okay, so they're talking about um, the paragraph is about the fact that Sydney's land is limited. It doesn't have lots of available land. It's limited available unconstrained land. So the land that is there is usually already in use for something. So we could say that land is unconstrained if it's empty or it's usable for any purpose. It's a kind of weird way of saying it, but it does make sense in this context to say available unconstrained land. That is land that doesn't currently have uses or isn't currently occupied, um, and is available to use for other things.
So,
Sydney is suitable for integrating business, office, residential, retail, and other development in accessible locations. So they're saying that that integration, which is like bringing these things together, can be done in Sydney in locations that are accessible. That is, they already have access to transport, or they're already near places that people live or work. And that following from that, it would maximize public transport use. So this is about it's about making the city denser. Um, and they're also talking about some of the flow-on effects of doing that, which is the using more public transport. Because if the city's not dense, then people have to get in their cars. Because I don't know if you've ever been to Wollongong.
Where is that?
So they have a train line there, but they have all of these train stations that are in the middle of like suburbs with no apartments or shops or anything near them. And so the train doesn't get used. Um, so they stopped the trains from using those stations. I think they stop there like once every hour. Um, so they're not maximizing public transport or encouraging people to walk. What they're doing because they're very sprawling, they're kind of sprawling, lightly populated areas. Everyone has to use their cars. They're converting that to a metro.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know the reason. Now I got it.
So
Perfect.
the reason that they're doing that actually is because the Sydney train line was too complex, and whenever there was a breakdown or delay on one part of the line, it would cause delays everywhere. So they decided to take half of the line, the Bankstown line, out of the network and make it into a metro separate from the rest of the train lines. So this is very much in response to the things that they're saying have happened in the previous sentences. Um, in recent decades, there has been a renewed interest in the study of culture that has crossed disciplinary boundaries. And then they're saying the resulting activities and cultural studies, that is, the studies of culture that have come out of that change of interest, um, have emerged. It's actually quite an awkward sentence, this one. I don't like it.
Is
But it's referring back.
I think now I got it. Yeah.
Mm,
I wanted.
mm. Because it's about would have promised is thinking about something that could have been in the past. So this field um, would have promised so much had it not been brought to an end by lack of funding. It's kind of it's kind of quite like hypothetical. Well, this would have been a good idea had we had some other resources to do it. Um, because we're talking about, so these have emerged. So up to this point, they've emerged, these ways of studying culture, which has already shed important new light. So it has
Oh
shed
yeah, you are
light,
right. Yeah. Yes.
and which promises to continue to do
Yes.
so. So we have to talk about the future in some way.
Mm,
And so
promises.
one way of talking about the future is to use the present tense, promises, but the verb choice is what tells us about the future. So he promises to do this. The program promises to achieve its goals within 5 years. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Perfect.
we,
Yeah,
yeah.
we got it. And also,
Uh, I guess we usually talk about this like if there's been a previous period of interest and then that has dropped away. So if, for example, you spent a lot of time on electrical engineering, say 5 or 10 years ago,
I want to
you
come back now.
cared about it, and now you've returned with renewed interest to that field.
I got it. So there should be a gap somehow.
That's it. So renewal implies that it's been neglected or it's died away and it's being renewed
I
in
don't
some
know
way. It's
why
being
people.
refreshed. Okay, so this is fully in the context of these academic subjects. So for a long time, there was more interest in like social anthropology, um, like economic history.
And also sociology, you see.
Yeah. So they had an interest in in different parts of their fields, but then more recently, they turn to the cultural questions. So instead of thinking about how people organize their institutions in anthropology, they started to think about what sorts of stories that people told. So a legitimate focus means one that is institutionally recognized. So because we're talking about academic subjects or disciplines, within each of these fields, there would be some sorts of things that were legitimate and some that are illegitimate. So if you said, I'm an anthropologist, but I want to study cryptocurrency, some people in the field would say, that's not legitimate. That's not an object that we can study. We don't study technology, we study culture and society. And if you then said, oh, actually, I want to study the cultural and social life of technology, so I'm an anthropologist of technology, then someone might say, okay, that sounds more legitimate. So when we're talking about legitimacy, it's like, is something recognized
Recognized
as
by who? By government or?
by the experts in those fields? So it's because it's a
But
well, what I'm saying is that some things would be considered legitimate topics to study
Mhm.
and others would not.
Yeah.
And so
Can you
if
give
you
us an
were,
example? Some,
let's say that you're a literary critic, but you want to write about um you wanted to write about like romance novels,
mm,
like cheap, um, low quality romance novels. Some people in the field would say, why are you paying attention to those? That's not a legitimate object of inquiry because it's not literary. Um,
legitimate, yeah, focus of inquiry. Yeah, okay, I got it.
or
Perfect.
or even a legitimate method would be another way of thinking about it. So to ask cultural questions might be seen as a legitimate method in geography.
So, okay,
Um,
if I can I say that?
to do dentistry
Yeah.
in engineering. I think what you'd be thinking about was, can you do dentistry like an engineer? Maybe not. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not legitimate. But maybe you can use some engineering in thinking about dentistry.
Such as drilling the holes
So, like if you drilled holes in a person the way that you drilled holes in like
on
a
a
piece of
metal,
metal,
he will die.
it probably isn't legitimate in the field of dentistry to do it that way. So that this is part of what they're talking about here. How
Mm.
does it become a legitimate focus? How does it become something that people can try to do to think about culture? I would say that studying culture is very rarely a legitimate focus of inquiry in engineering.
Okay. And yeah, that's important part that you learned a
Uh,
lot.
okay, so the impact of cultural factors on design theory. So something has an impact on something else. It's that word impact that says, um,
Perfect. Yeah, we got
you could say research into if you wanted, or research on the
into.
impact of cultural factors on design theory and practice. So the research is looking at how cultural factors affect design.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect. We got it. And why, can you explain about transfer of knowledge here?
so the transfer of knowledge makes sense because we're talking about between different groups. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take a quick break because I've just talk about the overlap of different areas of knowledge. So if we're talking about an overlap, we're talking about a space where both of them are
Yeah, they have some
occupying the
kind of, yeah.
same space, like one is on top of the other. So, but because we're talking about something that's happening between one group and other groups, so between academics and industry professionals, overlap doesn't kind of fit because between is what happens in between those, not what happens in one space that they both share. So this is still about the International Journal of Design.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I got it.
now, if I were formatting this text, I would capitalize in that very first clause, in the first sentence. the International Journal of Design needs capitals.
Which
Needs
one?
first.
J or I mean
So
I?
International Journal
Yeah.
of and Design. Design. So those three, International Journal and
So it's
Design.
I, J, and D.
So it should be International
Let me.
Journal of Design. So that would be how you signal that this was a proper name rather than
Yeah,
a
you're right.
description.
So as you said here, it should be I, J, and D should be capital. Great. And why
Uh,
did you say that? I mean, I know that
Um,
I have seen that a lot, but why did you say that it should be?
because it's a proper name. It
Hmm.
has to be.
So
And so, and each of these it's in each of the sentences, it aims to provide, it also seeks to promote.
hmm,
Those are pronouns referring back to that journal.
perfect. Now I got it completely. And can you explain
Yes.
why which is correct and what is incorrect?
Mm. Okay. It seeks to promote transfer of knowledge by emphasizing research. So, this type of research is research in which results are of interest or applicable to design practices. So, it's about what is in the research. Um,
What is
what's
in the research? Yeah.
the research contains something. So,
Actually, because
yeah, it's in which that, so in
in which
which something happens, research in which something happens or something is contained, that that connecting phrase in which it kind of only works in this way, in and which. It doesn't have, you can't have in what
oh, okay,
results are of
now we got it.
interest.
Actually, that was my
So you could probably say within which,
within
but
which, yeah,
or in which
in
results are
which,
of
but we don't
interest.
have in what. That's great.
Yeah.
So okay, as guys, as Adam said, we don't have in what, we have within which or in which. And
Yeah.
transfer of knowledge between, because of between we use transfer.
Mm,
And here we have impact on, because of this we use on, not without. Perfect. This was a tough one actually. Yeah.
yeah.
And why here by is incorrect and why of is correct? Bits
Mm.
of your own. What does that mean actually?
Okay, so it's bits that belong to you. Um, so in the context, if
I mean,
so bits here means pieces of
yeah,
prose.
pieces. I got it now.
Yeah.
Perfect. I
So
got it. Yeah.
bits of your own rather than
Perfect.
yeah.
So can we say that okay because why?
So
Hmm.
you'd need to say I've worked on that by myself or I've added this by myself, and what you'd be saying is I didn't work with anybody else. But you wouldn't be saying what you added or what you worked on. Whereas here you're saying you're adding your own.
Perfect.
It's about they belong to you.
Some
So that phrase of your own is a
that
prepositional phrase that tells
belongs
us
to me.
that those are things that belong to you or that you created. So you could imagine like you get ChatGPT to create a Python script for you, but then you modify it and add some bits of your own.
With some my own. Perfect.
And you
Yeah,
could
I got it.
also say that I then changed it by myself without help from anyone else.
Yeah.
Mm.
Perfect. So as Adam said, bits of my own is correct, or bits of your own is correct.
Mm.
So here and next ones. So yeah, this is if you explain about this one, why does this correct? I know that you might say, okay, it is third person, but show us what it why it does this correct. And yeah, the same problem we
Mm.
have here. Following by great apes, we have seen that. Followed by is correct. And also here instead and because. Let me
It
show you some.
compares.
Oh, cephalization index is something that compare the brain size with the body. Okay.
Yeah, it's
And
some
human
kind of
has the highest
index.
one, yeah?
So they don't. So I think what they're saying here is like whales, like a blue whale has a massive brain, but compared to its body, it's not it's not that big.
I got it. Civilization
Um,
index was lower. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas a human has a massive brain compared to its body.
Yeah.
Like
Perfect.
humans, yeah. So
I got
That's
it.
why instead, because they're contrasting between just looking at the raw size of the thing or using an index to make sense of it.
And
That's a good example.
yeah,
Comparing across the majors, mechanical engineering is
is
is more difficult than most other fields.
yeah, great, cool.
hmm
And also this one, this is a very tricky one, followed by
Mm. Okay, so based on the cephalization index, the brightest animals on the planet are humans. Those animals are, humans are followed by, but we've used an elision, so comma, followed by um, great apes, porpoises, and
So
elephants.
can you change the sentence somehow that we can use it following? Because we made this
Hmm.
mistake a lot.
You
And
need to start a new sentence. Um, so following humans are great apes, porpoises. Following humans on the cephalization index would be great apes, porpoises, and elephants.
okay, I got it. So
So you need
somehow.
to reorder the elements in the sentence to make this following work.
So if I say that,
You would have to say something like the hardest major in the university is mechanical engineering, followed closely by electrical engineering, and then this, and this.
I got it. So if I
Yeah.
want to change this one to following by, how
You
can I
can't
say?
really use following by.
Hmm. So okay, I
I think in this case, there's the final clause is actually a dependent clause where there's been some elision.
yeah.
So you could write a sentence that was something like humans are followed by great apes, porpoises, and elephants on the list of brightest animals.
Yeah, perfect.
Um,
So
but here they've dropped the verb.
can I
They've, you might say the most dangerous diseases of 2024 are COVID-19, followed by influenza, measles,
hmm,
and I don't know,
I think I got it now. I got the
emaciation.
structure. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So the first sentence is about the idea that countries are responsible for developing themselves. So that is Australia, for example, is responsible for its own economic development. So then they restate that and expand on it in the second sentence. They say national responsibility for national development is the necessary consequence of sovereignty. So a sovereign country is a country that acts independently of others.
Sovereignty.
Ah, you're thinking about Soviet.
So it is another thing. Yeah.
So it's a different word. So sovereignty is basically within the territory of your state or your country, something or someone is the supreme ruler. So the
So
country itself rules over its own territory.
so
So you could talk about the sovereign, yeah, but we don't really. Sovereignty is located in the people of those countries because the state is democratic.
democratic.
So
So
yeah.
so which country you I mean is this it has this feature.
All countries have this feature that they have authority to govern themselves.
I got it.
Um,
Perfect.
but the idea of some individual being the sovereign, that's the idea that the king has authority to govern a country, or that an emperor has authority to govern a country. Um, so that was the model, but in practice, it's not the model in Australia.
Yeah, great.
I mean, you can debate whether that the people are really sovereign or whether it's some kind of bureaucracy, but
So but
itself comes from its representation of, if it's a democratic state, it comes from the fact that it represents its people.
oh, it
Um,
represent it people.
that's the idea.
I got
So
it.
it effectively it's like a little circle. So the people have authority over the state. The state has authority over the territory.
Mm.
The people live in the territory.
Yeah, it is a
Um,
circle.
yeah.
Yeah, I
But
got it.
when we're talking just about states, the idea is that some states have sovereignty. Other states seek sovereignty but don't have it. So, for example, um,
In New
West Pap
Mexico.
West Papua, right?
Where is that? Is it a
In
country?
Yeah, it's the western part of Papua New Guinea. It's Indonesia.
Really?
It's an
Okay.
Indonesian province, but people who live there want their own sovereign state.
They look so happy, happier than me. I mean, the
Um,
west of Papua. Why they don't have? Okay.
so they want to be free from Indonesian sovereignty.
Okay, yeah. Free from Indonesians government somehow.
That's right. So at
Yeah.
the moment, the Indonesian state has sovereignty
Hmm.
in West Papua, but it's contested.
Is it part of Indonesia?
Well, that's what's disputed.
Oh, we don't know.
The people who live there, many of them say it shouldn't be part of Indonesia, but the Indonesians say it is part of Indonesia.
Based on the national
It's
United
not
Nations.
it's not recognized as an independent state.
Okay, so that is part of
Um,
Indonesia somehow.
or you might talk about like Taiwan,
It's
which
part of.
is from the Chinese perspective, it's part of China.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got it.
From the Taiwanese perspective, it's a
It's not.
sovereign nation. Um, from the perspective of, it depends who you ask.
Hmm.
So, like the International Football Federation, they call it Chinese Taipei because they're body.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So they don't call it Taiwan. They call it Chinese
Yeah, Chinese Taipei because
Taipei.
then otherwise the Chinese government won't work with them anymore. No, I'm talking about the international football, like FIFA. FIFA call it Chinese Taipei because they don't want China to be upset.
But I don't.
They have they're a growing market. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Oh
It's a
yeah,
growing
I got it.
market.
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
it. Perfect.
It's growing faster than the Taiwanese market, so we don't want to upset them.
Okay, yeah, I got it now. Perfect. So sovereignty. So and another, can you explain about this part? What does that mean, the word adapt here? I mean, explain this sentence. It's a very
So,
big sentence.
and called for all governments to begin implementing national sustainable development strategies. So some kind of strategy. Um, and then the 2005 summit, agreed on a target um, of 2006 for all developing countries to adopt and start implementation of these strategies. So they're just talking about a series of agreements. So in Johannesburg, they planned that every government would have a strategy by 2005. Then when they met in 2005, they agreed that in 2006, they would set their targets for implementation.
Perfect. I
That
got it.
is to adopt
To adopt. Yeah.
strategies. Adopting strategies means to start working towards them.
Yeah.
Plan of implementation, though. So, and adopting and starting implementation. So, of these strategies. So, adopting the strategies means saying, yes, these strategies are the ones we're going to use. Starting implementation means doing specific concrete things to
Perfect.
implement them. Mm. So a corollary is a logical consequence or a further logical um, implication, we might say. So if nations are responsible for their own development, they are also free to decide how they develop. So that's what they're saying here. The automatic corollary of that principle.
It means just an event, not very Sorry, we do answer.
It's
Okay.
a logical consequence. So what they're saying is that if you believe this one thing, you have to believe this other thing. If you believe nations are responsible for their own development, you have to believe that they're free to choose their own development. Because how could you be responsible for something if you don't have any control over it?
So, but when I
So
mean, but it doesn't have any meaning.
they're like saying that if you're inferring one idea from another.
Yeah.
So one idea comes from the other. If you believe one thing, you have to believe the other. If it's automatic, you don't, there's not even a debate. It has to be as a consequence.
Okay. I think I
Mm.
got. Yeah.
If that nations are sovereign in their own territory, then it's inevitable that they're free to decide how to act. Even if they decide that their strategy for economic development is to just like work their people to death, that's still part of the principle that they get to decide.
So, okay. I want to learn the meaning of this sentence. I think I got what you said in the previous one.
Mm.
Unfortunately, violence is the inevitable co- uh,
Mm.
corollary of such a revolutionary change in society. It means that, okay, we have some revolution, for example, I don't know, in Syria, for example, whatever. And now we have some kind of, uh, I don't know, this, something like that. Can we say that
Violence. So
violence, yeah,
they're saying they're kind of saying that it's an unavoidable consequence.
unavoidable
That
consequence, yeah,
if
I
you
got
change society in a revolutionary way, people will be hurt.
it. Okay, yeah,
Um, and I mean, if you're looking at Syria, the violence has already happened.
yeah,
In
unfortunately,
fact, there was violence being applied to stop the
mm,
change, as well as being applied to make the change. So,
yeah,
it's true in that case. Um, I guess you might take it to mean that there'll be violence, more violence because of a revolutionary change.
mm.
Um, yeah,
So,
you could say that. Um, I guess
so this sentence is
you'd have to be pretty confident though. Like, do you think that that's
no,
true? Because
no, but
I've met some PhDs,
well,
some
not this.
successful PhDs who don't seem to have learned anything.
No, that's completely. I just want to learn this as an example in general picture of the public, you know.
Yeah.
So, can you?
That intelligence is not an inevitable corollary of a higher degree.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But for the C, okay, let us talk about something that is positive or
No, that's not true because working hard, lots of people work hard and they don't get successful.
you're right.
So what I would say is, um, increased complexity is an inevitable corollary of business growth.
Again,
So
again.
increased complexity is an inevitable corollary of business growth. So the bigger your business gets,
Yeah,
it always gets more complex.
perfect.
Um,
It's so it means results, something that result from something. This one, yeah, I got it.
yeah, it's a consequence. But it's
Consequence.
something we can assume is going to happen. We're sort of saying you don't need to you don't need to show me that this is going to happen. We already know in principle that it's going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. We got it now. And also this part, not only be attuned to countries' circumstances.
Mm.
This implies the acceptance of the principle that development strategy shouldn't only be attuned. What does this sentence mean? Isn't this
Okay, so to be attuned to something means to be in tune with it, means to be, um, it means to be
let me show you
in
something.
harmony with it.
Yeah, I think
Attuned,
you're right,
attuned,
but when we search this one, it again to make someone to understand.
Mm.
Okay, so here it doesn't have this meaning, I think. Not only
It,
be understand to country, it doesn't have this meaning.
no, it's more like being in harmony with. So what they're saying is it's not enough for policy to be set so that it works for the circumstances of that country. It actually has to be led by that country. So they've agreed that someone can't come along from outside and say, this is the right thing for you, you have to do it. But look, it suits your situation. You've got to be able to decide for yourself how to do it.
So
Be in harmony,
actually, it
but
implies,
led by.
but also be prepared and implemented under the leadership of the governments of the.
So what they're saying is, even if like Vladimir Putin came to, let's say, Belarus and said, here is your 5-year plan for your economy. Um, my experts have already shown how this is perfect for your circumstances, and we can guarantee you exports. According to this piece of writing, according to this principle, um, they're saying that that's not enough, that that country should have decided for itself how to do that.
The,
Even if they came up with the same basic ideas, they need to be in leadership over.
the Belarus, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Um, I think that there's been a long history of like the United States going to like small countries and saying, here you go, here's your development plans. If you do this, we'll give you financial aid.
Maybe we lower your tariffs.
Yes,
Now
yeah,
the
that's
Trump
right.
is coming and increasing 25%
Yeah,
tax. Yeah.
yeah. So I think what this is all about is refusing that kind of situation where economic decisions are made outside of the countries that they affect.
But the problem is they will not keep their promises. It happens a
No,
lot.
no, they won't.
Yeah, yeah, that's the
Um,
business actually.
but I
So
guess you've got to decide, is it better that people agree on how things should be, or is it better that people just never agree to begin with
yeah,
and just do
exactly.
whatever they want to each other? Like,
So
if you say, if everyone in a room agrees we're not going to start fighting each other, and then someone does start fighting, at least you've got something to point to and say, we all agreed we weren't going to do this, guys. But if no one makes that agreement, they just assume they're all going to start fighting each other. I feel like that's inevitably going to get worse. So I guess that's the point of this kind of agreement, that at least you can point to it and say, but you agreed. Even if, like Donald Trump says, I don't care. Uh, some
perfect.
people will listen, maybe. I don't know.
So, no, no, definitely some people, not all of the people. Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
not enough.
That's enough. Exactly. Yeah. And also,
Yeah, so a sighting is is like someone has seen this thing, so they can talk about it as a sighting.
but
And
collections can be correct.
the reason why sightings fits here is because it's have been reported. Reported? You report sightings. You don't usually report collections.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So I
Yeah.
report sightings of a burglary. I don't know. It's
You
still a
might report sightings of a wanted criminal.
wanted criminals. Yeah,
Um,
get the
so
reward.
there have been several sightings of the that guy who assassinated the CEO in New York. There were several sightings in Pennsylvania until he was identified at a McDonald's. Uh,
McDonald's is a problem. We find that.
apparently they didn't even pay the person the ransom, the reward for spotting him and reporting him to the police.
Oh, okay. So,
Reward.
but
They offered them a reward of $60,000 if they reported him to the police,
they finally they didn't give
but they
the.
didn't give her the money.
Trust me, no one report any unwanted person anymore in United
No.
States. It will be a war. That's crazy. Anyway,
Yes, so sightings is like that. They've been seen, and you can report back on sightings.
yeah, report sighting. So we gotta be see.
Mm.
And here it said that
Um, I think somehow would still need to modify another another word. So questionable, um, questionable here would be, what would it be grammatically? Is it an adjective?
question is adjective because it has able.
Yeah,
Able.
so it's what they're saying is um, that this idea that it might invade a particular region was under question, that it was open to doubt. Um, whereas somehow doesn't work grammatically here. Somehow would be an adverb.
Oh,
You'd
you're
need
right.
to
Yeah,
add.
you're right. Adjective. Yeah, you're right.
So you could say it was somehow unknown, still unknown whether. So what you'd be saying is the fact that they didn't know this is kind of beyond belief, somehow still unknown. So you'd need an extra word there if you were going to use somehow. The adverb could modify an adjective or it could modify something else, but it can't kind of sit there in the sentence like it is.
Yeah, perfect. You got it.
Increased in abundance. So if something's abundant, it means there's many of them.
Oh, increase
If you said that they increased in size, it would just be that there are a few of them, but they're bigger. But if you increase in abundance, it means there's more of them.
Yeah, perfect. And
I think the problem that I have here is that network and connections is a different metaphor to flows. So you could talk about information connections or networks because you could imagine that there are nodes that are connected to each other, but then flows is what moves across that
yeah,
network.
exactly.
So to
Exactly.
say that it's a network of flows, for me, that's mixing the metaphors. Um,
So we have some nodes and then it will
yeah.
the flows information flow. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
So for
Perfect.
me,
Yeah.
this is a little confusing.
Like a graph.
Um, because flows can overlap, they can kind of run over each other, right?
Yeah,
Whereas networks with nodes and
exactly.
connections, they don't overlap.
You're right.
So,
Yeah, I got it.
if it was just in terms of networks, interconnected works. But then once they say flows, not sure.
You know, you're perfect. Yeah, we got it now. We don't have any question now. We got it. And here, yeah, can you explain why that is wrong here?
Okay, so it's using. So I imagine that before this, we've had a series of different ways that you can use the book. You could It's got all of these different things in it, and then they're
Mhm.
saying, however you use it, like regardless of how you use
Oh,
it,
regardless of.
I'm
Okay.
confident that you will
I'm confident
emerge.
you will be
Yeah, you will get a better understanding, or you'll
ima-
come out of the process.
Oh, okay.
Um, so it's actually in whatever manner or degree. So how you use the book. So they're kind of saying, doesn't matter how you use this book, you're going to learn something from it.
Okay.
Whereas we often use however to mean like nevertheless or even so. So we use it more as a contrast. Whereas here, it's not being used in that way. And I think the clue is that there's no comma after the however.
Yeah,
However you use the
yeah,
book,
there
I'm
is no comma.
confident.
You're right. So can I,
Yeah, so what you're saying is it doesn't matter how you do it exactly, but if you do it, it's good.
yeah,
You'll learn something.
however you
Um,
putting your room, you
you
will
know,
get some kind of discipline and stuff. Yeah, great, perfect. We
like
got it.
however you choose to study mathematics, there are some core topics that you will need to learn. And then you could list them. So you might have just said, some people choose to use a textbook, other people look at videos online, other people enroll in classes. However, you choose to use mathematics, you must cover this material.
Perfect.
Mm.
Finally, ever
Um,
used as a what you
as
call it?
a logical connecting
Yeah,
word to indicate a contrast.
yeah.
It means despite its being,
Oh,
or
it's
although. So yes, they're saying it's got all of these things in it, although it's going to be a bit incomplete and a bit short.
so because of this,
Yeah.
so despite can be correct.
So you'd have to say despite its being an inevitably brief and incomplete one. So you'd actually need a full phrase to capture the same meaning here. You could use although an inevitably brief and incomplete one. So if that were an option, although is more commonly used than albeit.
So albeit, but for despite, it should be
You
dis
need despite its being.
despite
Des-
its being some kind
Despite
of
its being and
noun.
inevitably,
Yeah, despite
it's
its
just
being.
that phrase you kind of need more to make that the word despite.
So
They're very closely related
yeah, can,
grammatically. What you would the equivalent would be something more like I agreed to attend the University of Tasmania despite its being a smaller and less interesting campus.
perfect. Despite its.
Um, you might say this was an important stage in my life, albeit one that I did not recognize at the time. And so you'd be saying, even though I didn't recognize it.
Also,
Yeah,
yeah.
although I didn't recognize it at the time. That's right.
Also, I didn't
Um,
recognize it at the time. Yeah.
yeah.
Or
Oh,
despite its importance, I didn't recognize it at the time.
yes, I didn't recognize it at the time. So you need to add more if you're going to use despite,
Okay.
but you're right, these are related. They're
No, now
related
we
conjunctions.
now we got it. Perfect. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah,
Imagine the traditional way of reading a book is you pick it up, you open it, you read it, and you don't stop until you get to the end.
yeah. You will have a why we
As a
cannot use with.
complicated, rich, and diverse field. So this is how you will understand it. You'll understand it as this type of field, as complicated, rich, and diverse.
Yeah. Great.
Um,
Perfect.
so as here is related to the idea of how, but when we use it grammatically in this way, we have to use as.
Yeah. Great. And
Hmm. To, yeah, this is a good question. Um, by the time you complete your PhD, you will understand your field or your field of study as um, as an inevitably complex area of disagreement. I don't know. Or you'll understand your field of study as a set of research agendas. So what happens is at the end of this process, you're going to now see this in a different way.
perfect.
It's how you see it.
That's how to see. And
Mm.
here,
Saying you will have a good working understanding as well as knowledge of. So we're imagining that these are two items on a list, as well as knowledge of some of the most significant and iconic examples of public archaeology in action. So they're saying that there are basically two things that you'll learn if you read the whole book. You will learn how to understand the field, seeing it as complicated, rich, diverse. You will also have knowledge of the most important examples of the field. They'll tell you what the field is like.
okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So you're gonna understand what public archaeology is like. You're not
So
just gonna understand what it is, but what it's like.
what's
But
like?
but as well as knowing, you'll know about a bunch of different examples.
Mm, yeah.
Mm.
And when you said an iconic example, it means that everyone knows. What does it mean, iconic? Can you give us an iconic
Mm.
example in archaeology? For
Of
example, I don't know, a
public
statue.
archaeology.
Yeah, public
Um,
archaeology.
I think it would have to be like the sort of example that that comes up if you search for the phrase, but I would say
No, no, let me
Pompeii.
show you. It's a very difficult one, actually.
I would say
Public,
an iconic example would be Pompeii in
what
Italy.
is Pompeii? I haven't heard of Pompeii. I have. Oh, yeah. Is it this one's?
Yeah, so that's actually
A city.
a great big archaeological dig. Like the whole city has been excavated,
Oh my God.
and it's happened in public, and it's been part of a public because tourists go there as well. So you might say that that's an iconic example of public archaeology.
Yeah, I got it. Perfect. Yeah.
Hmm.
Public archaeology. Yeah. It's kind of excavated city. Yeah. It's a very
It's
large one.
it's where archaeology is not separated from public life. So in the middle of Sydney, there's a place called the Big Dig.
Big DIG.
Big Dig.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, let me see if I can find. It's an archaeology education center in Sydney. That's it there.
This one.
Yeah, so as a member of the public, you can go there and look at the excavation. Um, they found a bunch of colonial era uh,
This part.
archaeology
Yeah, great.
buried underneath the suburb.
There should be some kind of money there. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, perfect. And Adam,
Yes, yeah. So you could say his assistant professorship. During his professorship, he was author or co-author on some 50 articles.
perfect. Now
Mhm.
we got it. And also this ones, I think we don't have problem for this ones. Why
Okay,
attach?
so this is something that we do. We give importance to something or we attach importance to something. That is, we see it as important. Um, so I could say that um, that undergraduates attach great importance to their final grades, but that HDR students don't care as much about grades. Instead, they attach importance to professional connections and opportunities to publish. So, what do those groups of people give importance to? You could actually just say give importance to.
No, no,
They're
just
used in more or less the same way. Um, you could say that we surveyed 1,000 voters in Australia, and 65% attach a great importance to online safety,
online
whereas
safety.
only 35% consider universities to be important. So similar ways of saying the same thing.
Perfect. So can we say, for example,
Hmm. Yeah.
okay, attach importance. So yeah, and
You
and
might say they attach greater importance to getting a job
graduation,
after
being graduation. Yeah,
graduation
graduation.
than you know professional recognition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Attach and importance, guys. Don't forget this part. And also this part, why we have why doesn't work and
Mm.
so works.
I personally am never 100% sure on when to use thus. Um,
Me,
um, okay, so strictly speaking, hmm, I feel like when thus is used to mean as a consequence of this, like consequently, it's usually put at the beginning. Um,
because when we see the
hmm,
example, it's and here. So now they use it in a new sentence, but not sentence actually. Sorry, to I don't know after it before it to infinitive.
Now, when so is used, it's it's about cause,
Yeah,
not manner. So when so is used like this to link these ideas together, when humans started to grow food and establish permanent settlements, water was needed. So settlements have always grown up near water. So settlements have always grown up near water because water is needed for crops and animals.
yeah,
So you're imagining so is like a because, whereas thus more strongly implies something about how something is done rather than a relationship of cause. Having said that, both of them are used in this way. So one reason why this is very confusing is that thus is used is used in a bunch of different ways, and so is used in a bunch of different ways, and they sometimes overlap in usage, even if it's not preferred usage.
I think I got it now
Mm.
because and also
So I usually think of rebuke as being about rejecting something. But I think it's more about criticizing something. So a rebuke is like a harsh criticism. Um, so if you said that I, I attempted to publish this article, but was rebuked by the
rejected.
reviewers. Well, you could say you were rebuked by the reviewers. Um, and although the editor did not reject the article, they asked me to make major changes, which I did not have time to do.
Yeah.
So you were rebuked, that is harshly criticized by the reviewers, but rejected is what the editor does.
So, but when we check the dictionary, it said
Mm.
that to speak angrily to someone.
Mm.
So I
Yeah,
was
that's the
rebuked by
harshness. Yeah.
harshness. Okay, I got
Mm.
it. But when we check the second one,
Just a
from
criticism. I don't think it's strong enough. I think if you got up and made a speech where you said he was the scum of the earth and that all of his policies were garbage,
yeah, that is
like
review.
that would be more like a rebuke.
I got it now. So
Um,
yeah, okay.
but I guess someone like Trump wouldn't experience that as a rebuke because I think
He has already used to.
there's no legitimate criticism. If you criticize him, then you're already his enemy, right? So
Yeah, yeah, great. I got it. Perfect. Thank you, Adam.